Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Dark Ages Heritage of Charlemagne, which is a 2021 release board game published by Board and Dice, who you may recognise as the company built on the back of Daniele Tascini designs. However, this is not a Tascini design, this is made by Adam Kwapinski and Andrzej Nowak. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes probably around 3 hours to play. Now, Dark Ages is actually split into 2 games. You've got this one, the Heritage of Charlemagne, and you've also got Holy Roman Empire. The games are relatively similar, or pretty much 90% similar. However, you are able to plug the 2 games together to make a 1 to 8 player game. So if you really do want to get that higher player count, this one does actually facilitate that. But let's talk about what this game is all about. So as you can probably imagine, there's a lot going on in this game. I'm going to try my best not to go into all the little rules minutiae and just give you a general overhaul and an overview about what's going on in this game. So as you can see here, you've got the massive board here, which is a map of Europe. Of course, if you plug this one in with the Holy Roman Empire board, then it's going to be even bigger. And you're going to each start with a home kind of city or your home domain. And you're going to have a leader, which in my example is this one here, William I the Pious. And each of these characters has a couple of cards that come with that leader, which give you a little kind of boost in a certain field. You're also going to have your troops. You're going to have your own little starting city here, which you can upgrade. You've got these different farms here, which are going to increase your ability to move troops around the board. You can potentially get these commanders as well, which is like an optional module you can put into the game. And this game is very modular, I should say. There is a lot of different things you can tweak and put in and take out of the game. You've got all your different resources here. So you've got your steel, your stone, your wood, and your leather, and they all kind of relate to your player board, which shows all the different things you can build in the game and different troops and stuff you can make. So you're going to start the game with very basic troops, like so, and you're going to have the ability to upgrade them to make them better in combat and just generally more durable. You can see here on this board as well that you've got different tracks and things. So this one here is my farm track, which basically determines not only how many points I'm going to get at the end of the game. So the more farms I get down, the better, because I get more points. But again, the higher they are up on this track means that you can move more troops around the board at any time to make you kind of more maneuverable. You've also got a warehouse here, which is important because when it comes to certain points in the game where you need to pass, then you can keep hold of certain resources, and the higher you go on this track, you can keep more in your supply and potentially sell more goods, which ties into this part of the board up here, which is the kind of communal board where you can choose to get new cards, new technologies into your fold. I've got this track here, which basically determines how many cards you can draft from. So at the moment, you see the orange player here is at this point, meaning that they can only draft at this point or lower down the board here, because this is a sliding scale, whereas the blue player can draft all 4 of these cards should they take that action. You've got this little church track here, which is a countdown to the end of the game. You've got this big deck of cards, which is going to be used to refresh the technology row. And I suppose the main action and user interface of the game is this part here, which is going to be how you choose your actions and the fallout of those actions. So let's talk about what all the actions are. Okay, so yeah, throughout the game you're going to have 5 actions which you can select from, and these are interchangeable. So sometimes, they're going to be in different spots, which can affect the different reactions you can take should that situation arise. But they're all pretty simple in their own regard here. So you've got maneuver, which means that you can choose a cluster of your soldiers and move them from kind of region to region or province to province, depending on the borders. A development of culture here, which means that you can take a card from the culture offer. So this is the culture offer. So you can take cards straight into your hand to be able to play them a bit later. You've got the building action, which is going to be, of course, how you're going to build buildings. So you're going to build these cities, which are great because they allow you the opportunity to build more of these kind of manufacturing buildings and also let you climb the track up here. They also are really good defensively as well, because if people attack your regions with cities, then you get a bit of a proxy unit to help you defend that attack. You've got these different, again, production buildings which produce you the leather, they'll produce you the steel, they'll produce you the wood and the stone. So of course you want to have a good balance of different resources in order to build other things, because all the different things are quite costly to build in the first place. And you can also build these churches. Churches are one of the main ways to score points in the game. So you can see here I built a church. So when you build a church, you're going to get 5 points plus 1 point for every region next to it that does not have a church. So you're really kind of incentivized to evangelize the religion and get those churches down first. You can also build these keeps. Now, keeps are really good. They start off quite cheap, but they can get more expensive the higher you build those towers. So you can see here in my main city that I've built 2 keeps, which are these 2 little kind of cylinder things you can plug into these cities, and they will increase your ability in combat in any adjacent region by giving you more manipulation of your dice, and they also boost your combat score at the end. So again, if you have keeps and people attack keeps, then you are much more likely to win the battle if you are the owner of that keep. And again, you can increase your warehouse here by paying these resources in order to be able to carry more resources through round to round, and of course being able to sell them. When you sell the resources, you are going to look at the worth and then move up this track the correlating amount of spaces. So that's the building action. You've also got the research action, which is going to let you play technology cards and upgrade your military units. And I suppose the main thing that ties to are these cards here. So I think this is actually a really cool mechanism where you actually you start with these kind of basic things in here when you acquire these technology cards, and they'll let you do different things. So this one here, this Private Deniers one says immediately I'll get 1 gold, but whenever I take that action, I can actually pay a gold in order to move up and upgrade that action to the next one. So this one says I can spend 1 gold as any 2 resources instead of the usual 1. Or if I upgrade it again, I can, whenever I pass, I get 2 gold instead of the usual 1. And you can see here as well, these are all acquiring me more points at the end of the game. So there's a lot of variation in what these can do. Some of them are going to be more attack focused, some are going to be to get units onto the board, and they can do lots of different things. So I really do like that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you ever acquire these upgraded troop actions, then you can again pay a gold in order to upgrade the strength of your military units. And the final one here is to take a recruit action, which is when you pay the amount of resources corresponding to your troop value. So here, again, my infantry costs 1 leather, and then I can take one of my infantry units, like so, and put it on any region where I have a city. Now, as you can see here, the way we've taken these actions, we're going to be placing these noble discs on the different spots correlating to that action. But once you place the third disc, let's say I just place this one on here, as soon as there's 3 on a stack, the one at the bottom is going to take a fallout action, which is going to be the 2 adjacent below it. So, for example, because that one's just been placed, I can maybe put this one here and take a wood or a stone, or I could have gone this way and I could sell goods or trade iron for gold. You can regroup, which gives you more kind of maneuverability to kind of retreat back into your own regions. You can recruit, which we discussed earlier. You can take wood or leather, or you can do a cultural exchange where you can sell cards for gold or buy any card for gold. So I do like this this mechanism here where people are taking actions and just naturally you might have a fallout of that and get a reaction to get more mileage out of each of these discs. So of course this is what the game is going to look like towards the end of the game, but if you can imagine a lot of these regions, in fact most of these regions being completely abandoned and completely empty apart from our home regions, but all the other regions are going to be allocated one of these barbarian tokens. So these are going to be flipped randomly face up or face down. So you've got the one side that shows the different units that are going to be there as barbarians, and the other side which is going to show almost the boon in which you're going to get by defeating those barbarians. So you can see this one here, it says take a military technology from the cultural offer. So that's the reward you're going to get by defeating those barbarians. So in order to expand out, you're going to have to defeat them, and they're going to be basically these proxy units or these default units, which are pretty basic, but I suppose initially they can be quite challenging. And the more of these tokens you acquire by beating them, you're going to add them to your player board here. So you can see I've already defeated 2 and got a couple of rewards. You're going to also add an additional unit for each one you get and get victory points for doing so. So yeah, that's really something to consider, and they do get tougher and tougher, but of course you're going to need to expand out in order to start conquering these different regions which can produce different resources, because I will say that resources in this game are really tight and it can feel like you're in a bit of a straitjacket at times, and it's quite hard to get the ball rolling and get things going. But I'll talk about that a little bit later and talk about a few more things what we're actually trying to do in order to get the points. So let's talk about all the different methods you can actually get points. So first off, you can try and claim these title cards here by conquering certain regions. So you can see here I've really got at least the majority in Aquitaine. So I've got 2 out of the 3 things here. That means I can potentially get these titles, which will get me victory points. And not only initially, but also at the end of the game if I'm still controlling it. And these actually let you basically do a bonus action by piggyback of another one you've just taken and exhausting that card. You can also get points by endgame scoring. So a lot of these cards will offer you endgame points, but I won't go into detail there. Of course, I mentioned the farms earlier. The more farms you get out, the more points you can get. Again, the more barbarian tokens, the more you can get. If you upgrade your warehouses enough, you can get victory points. If you get churches down, of course, you're going to get victory points because I said, as you place them down, you get points for all the adjacent regions that don't have churches. The keeps are going to get you victory points depending on the different areas around them that you control. And all different things like that. So there's quite a lot of ways you can get points. And of course, you can actually end up getting points if you end up conquering or trying to attack your opponent's capitals. So I suppose that leads us into combat. So let's talk about how combat actually works. So despite this one being very Euro, the actual combat in the game is purely roll and resolve. So you've got your 3 different units, as I mentioned. You've got your infantry, your kind of archery, and your cavalry. And it's going to be resolved in a specific order. So your archery, of course, are going to go first. And then it's going to be your kind of charging cavalry units. They're going to go in. And then your infantry units are all going to fight at the same time. And you're going to start with some basic modifiers. So you can see my cavalry here just hits on a 5+, and then on a 6+ in melee. But as the more you increase these units, you get better and better and better. You can end up hitting on much better numbers. So you can see my crossbowmen here actually hit on 3+ in ranged attacks and 5+ in close quarters. And that's going to be how it works. You're just going to be killing units and rolling off against each other, and then you're going to calculate the battle score at the end of the game or at the end of the fight, seeing how much strength and military units you have left being boosted by these keeps if need be. So very simple roll to resolve combat, which I think is a bit of a juxtaposition to the rest of the game, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So as long as you have one of these discs placed on the main action board here, you can choose to pass, which will mean you can take all your discs back into your hand, ready to deploy again in the next kind of phase of play. I will say there's no rounds or anything in this game. It is a constant free-flowing game where you keep taking actions. However, if you choose to pass, you are going to get a gold, which is useful, of course, which is going to be a wild resource and going to let you upgrade your technology, etc. But it's also going to mean you're going to have to refer to your warehouse and potentially lose goods, sell goods, depending on that threshold here. So it really is a game where you're incentivized to use your resources, at least early in the game, because they will go to waste if you don't use them. After that, you can actually choose to take little bonus actions such as settle. So as you can see here, I've invaded Normandy. I'm in control of it, but I haven't got a farm down there yet. So in order to get a farm down there, I'm going to have to give up a number of military units depending on my settlement value. So you'll look at your own little leader card here, which will show 3 different values, which shows the settlement costs depending on different criteria. So the first one means if it's in your home region and next to your capital. This one, I believe it's next to your capital, but not in your home region. And the final one is anywhere else. So you can see here, Aquitaine was my capital. This is nowhere near it, so I'd have to give up a 5 value of troops in order to do that. So at the moment, my infantry are worth a value of 1, so I could, value of 2, so I couldn't do that. So I've only got 2 out of the 5 I need. But however, maybe down the line, I would maybe do this, where I have a complete value of 5 because my cavalry are worth 1. These are worth 2 each. I can give up these troops in order to build a new farm there, which of course is going to get me more points, and it's going to increase my ability to maneuver around the board. So hopefully that gives you a basic idea about how the game plays out. You're going to keep taking actions until either the amount of churches are built, depending on the player count, until either the deck runs out, until a player has built all of their technologies and upgraded them to the highest capacity, or until a certain amount of these cities are built. And so yeah, that's pretty much how the game's going to play. Of course, this is a more of a generic overview. I've not gone into tremendous detail. There are some things I've missed out, but again, hopefully it's given you a general impression. Now, I do think a lot of the flavour comes from the cards in this game, because there's a lot of variation in the cards and what they can do. So let's just take a look at a few of them here. So some of them will come in hand with your leaders, etc. So this one here, this Cluny Abbey, it means instead of placing a noble disc, I can actually use this card and gain 2 culture immediately for each city in a neighbouring province. So it's good to kind of boost things up before playing certain cards to get bigger and bigger multipliers. You've got, like, of course, the military units that come in different levels, and you can see they're double-sided as well, and you can only ever level 1 up at a time. So if I had like a level 2 cavalry, I can upgrade into these really powerful level 3 knights, which of course are really durable because they have like more health, they hit on better numbers, but of course they'll be more expensive to build. This one costing a massive 3 steel, which is not the easiest thing to acquire. You've got these commanders as well, which I mentioned, and my one here, like Edward I, he lets me hit or get kind of a pre-rolling phase where I roll 2 dice to hit on a 4+ if I have a set of archers, cavalry and infantry. You can build these massive buildings, which I've done here in my capital. And these are really cool. They're expensive, but they're really useful, which means that I can build 3 levels of a keep, but then from then on, whenever I resolve a recruit action, I can place an infantry unit for free in this province. So it's a nice little spawning military unit there. And you've got these different weird vassal cards here, which let you do cool things once per round. So this one here lets me remove a barbarian token from a province neighbouring my capital, and I may move any number of units from a neighbouring province into that province. So it means I can kind of go around fighting barbarians and choose to settle quite quickly. And I've got this card here as well that lets me take any card from the offer, regardless of where I am on that culture track here. And there's a lot of different things like that you can do as well. There's also these quite interesting cards, which hopefully I'll get one out quickly, where you can actually get little points bonuses depending on certain situations. So undoubtedly I'm not going to find one now, but they are really quite interesting. And let's just see if I can dig one out. Here we go. One like this that says, I can discard any number of resources and I receive 1 victory point for each resource you discard. Or these ones here where, you receive 2 victory points for each city you control with 3 buildings. And you can receive 2 victory points for each level 3 keep you control. So these are all very situational and they're good little points grabs because they have to be scored out or cashed out at the end of the round when you pass. And you can see here as well, which I didn't mention, that each city can only actually have 3 different buildings attached to it, or 3 of the same buildings if you want to, but they do kind of compound on each other. So if you have 2 of the same buildings in the same city, then you get bigger multipliers. So the first building is going to produce 1 resource, then the second one is going to produce 2 resource, and the third one is also going to produce 2. So you can get a maximum of 5 resources per city if you build all the same thing in that city. And that is going to happen whenever you pass. You're going to get all your new resources in, which I should have mentioned earlier. But let's talk about what I like and what I don't like about this game, because there's quite a lot to cover and it's quite a difficult thing to articulate because, again, there's a lot going on here. So let's start off with some of the basics. So first off, the main actual action selection system I think is great. So simple, really pure, and I just thought, just put your disc on a location. If somebody else goes there, fine, but the third person who goes there, boom, you're going to take a fallout action, which is going to be one of these 2 here. And that's a really smooth system, so easy to explain, and you know what, considering how simple it is, I'm surprised that many other games haven't used this system. It's so elegantly done and really well implemented. So yeah, 2 thumbs up for that part of the game. I also really enjoy these cards here. I think these are really well done and they do scale really well and do, again, let you do lots of different things. So I love the way you can invest in certain strategies and can tailor your own little engine, I suppose, differently to the other people. So there's loads of variation of these cards that do lots of different things, and I think it's really quite impressive. And again, another streamlined, simple system which works really well. I also do like the actual scoring systems in this game as well, because you're actually not massively incentivized to go fight and smash the other players. You can get a lot of points by just building churches or building your farms and building keeps. So it really does have that point salad style feel to it. And of course, you can even get a lot of points by cashing in those special cards. So there's a lot of different routes you can go to victory, lots of different paths you can take, and lots of ways to generate points. I will say there was also a lot of things I did have quite a problem with this game with. I suppose one of them, which I was bound to assume, the combat system is a bit underwhelming. I'm not a massive fan. In fact, I generally hate roll to resolve combat. And this one is that, which, as I mentioned earlier, it feels a bit it feels a bit of a disconnect from the rest of the game, which is obviously very Euro in its approach. And this part here is, as Ameritrashy as it gets. I can understand why they did it. It's a kind of a hybrid style game, but it just feels somewhat unsatisfying when you end up killing a lot of units, especially when they're so expensive and hard to build in the first place. And that kind of ties into my next thoughts, which is, I suppose, the pacing of this game and the general vibe and flow of it. So it really does feel like you start this game in a bit of a straitjacket. It's very hard to get your motors running, to get things flowing and get things, kind of resources going through your system in order to build and build and build. It does eventually hit a kind of threshold where you do start to generate a more comfortable amount of resources to keep you going, especially because these cities do compound when you build more of the same buildings. But it really does feel like you are pulling teeth to get maybe one basic resource when you need it. And the buildings, they're not massively expensive, and of course you can improve them as well with technologies, but it does feel like you are going through a lot of actions to take very basic actions or build basic buildings as a payoff to all that build up. And that's kind of a running theme throughout the whole game for me. It feels like you're doing a lot for very little. I think maybe they could have tweaked the pacing by giving you more resources just at any time, maybe starting with more resources. Again, it just feels like you're constantly walking in mud, not getting anywhere, and it can feel like you're just taking a basic actions just to pass and pass and pass in order to acquire gold to use it as a random resource. So yeah, that's something I did have a problem with. That it did kind of alleviate as the game went on, and certainly by the end of the game it became a lot more fun and a lot more dynamic than it does at the start of the game. I just would have liked to have seen it have that bit of a kick up the ass to get rolling and to kind of chuck people in at the deep end as soon as the ball gets rolling. In terms of the decisions you have to make, you are completely bombarded with decisions on what you can do. Of course, are you going to go and grab the cards that are only available at the lower spots before the other people do? Are you going to try and make a military maneuver before the other people do? Are you going to try and upgrade your cars? Do you want to upgrade your military units to boost you up in the first place? Are you going to settle because you can't even attack until you have a certain threshold here anyway, because you're going to end up wasting units? So all of this does tie in together quite well, and it does actually synergize with each other. All the different parts of the game do merge quite well, and one thing does affect the other thing. But it all kind of ties back to feeling a bit plodding, because you do have so many prerequisites and so many things to consider in order to do basic maneuvers. So even if you want to acquire cards here, climbing up this track isn't the easiest. It's a bit of a slog to get rolling, and in order to go higher and higher up this track, you're going to have to discard resources which are like gold dust in the first place. And that almost ties in with the military fighting as well. You will build up a bit of a military, but I think mostly you'd use that as a deterrent rather than going to attack the other players, because it's just too costly. You do get a bit of compensation if you end up kind of ransacking an opponent's region and they have farms. That you kind of can send infantry units back to your hometown, which is, a minor consideration, something that's good for the game, I think. But I didn't ever find myself having that bloodlust and wanting to have a massive incentive to go and invade another region that has another player already in it, for those reasons, because it's just too costly. You can spend 10 turns building up an army, and you're just not willing to sacrifice it in a single roll of the dice. Additionally, there is some competition over these titles, which I think is good, because there's quite a big chunk of points here, and that can be quite significant. So they are trying to throw you a bone there and try to make you attack the other players, but I do think it all stems back to just being too costly and resources just being too scarce. Dark Ages does take, as I said, about 3 hours to play, which, to be honest, I was expecting. However, I'm starting to feel like, am I going to really reach for this one off the shelf when it takes 3 hours, with a lot of that being quite a slow, methodical plod, whereas I could play maybe 2 pretty involved Euro games for an hour and a half a piece, in the same time it takes me to play this one. Now, I do understand and appreciate this game does have more of an epic feel to a lot of the other Euro games. There's a lot going on here, a lot of things to consider, and you do have somewhat of an ownership over what you end up building throughout the game, and you do get attached to a little empire. But I do feel like it would have benefited from being a bit quicker, And it does vary in pace as well, because the game isn't a set amount of rounds. It is until somebody builds a certain amount of churches or cities or upgrades their cards. And I wouldn't say it massively outstayed its welcome, but I think it's more of the pacing that goes with that. It just made it feel a bit too long, and made it feel like a bit of a slog. The uptime itself is pretty good, because again, you're just placing one of these discs down, potentially getting a fallout action. There's not a massive amount of AP in this game. It really is just about managing your resources and what you're going to do about them, and just kind of managing that tightness and what you're going to do next. I think aesthetically, I'm really happy with the way the game looks. I think it's got a quite nice table presence. Certainly there's something to look at wherever you look. It's very sprawling. There's certainly boards everywhere, and you're going to need a massive table to get this one to the table. I've got a very large table and I can barely fit everything on, and this is only a 2-player example. So imagine being 4 players where each player's got their board. You're going to need an absolutely massive area in order to play this with, and I can't even imagine playing this in the 8-player version. You're going to need a banquet table. Absolutely ridiculous. The actual physical production of the game is, to be honest, right up there with the best. I mean, the actual board itself is, it's nice and durable. All the miniatures are pretty good. I mean, these aren't overly exquisite or anything like that, but they do feel quite good. All the buildings are nice and durable as well, particularly these cities and the actual these kind of big constructs, and the actual commanders as well. These are fantastically done. They're really good sculpts. Again, really robust, and they do look quite cool when they're on the table. The only thing I think I complain about is the resources. So these basic little cardboard chits, they feel a bit cheap. They don't quite match with the rest of the game. It would have been nice to see better versions of these. I understand they made deluxe ones for the game, but I think if you don't choose the deluxe version, you should still get a decent product. And I think these are a bit of a corner cutting, and they're being a bit cheeky, trying to make people take the deluxe version. The actual artwork on the cards and stuff is right up there. I'm actually quite aware with this artist who did this art, and he is absolutely brilliant. I mean, this is such glorious artwork. This is right up my alley, and I think these look really kind of, they really signify the time and the age of where this game is set. And I really do like, in general, I like the production. I think it works quite well. And you can really can decipher what each thing is supposed to do. So yeah, in terms of production, as you'd expect with a game like this, it's really good. Scalability is a strange one with a game like this, because normally you'd expect games like this to really peak at the higher player counts. However, I don't think that's the case with Dark Ages. I would happily play this at 2. I would even happily play this at 3, just to add that bit of spiciness in and more competition for the areas. I will say as well that the game does scale depending on the player count, not only by the number of churches, the number of buildings, but also the regions that are active. So in a 2-player game, like all of England here is shut off, you can't go there. All of these parts here are shut off, so the board does kind of compensate for the tightness for the player count. However, I do think when you start injecting that 4th player in, it's going to start making the game feel a bit too long, and you're going to be a bit disinterested when it's other people's turns. As for considering playing this at 5, 6, 7, 8 players, I think that's absolutely ludicrous. This game is not equipped to deal with that amount of players. So let's go into some final thoughts here for Dark Ages. So first off, if you are a regular kind of viewer of my content, you might be aware that this was actually probably my most anticipated game this year. I was so looking forward to this one, because on paper, this has everything I'd want. I love this time period. It's like my favourite time period in setting out there. I love the idea of having this epic, sprawling, kind of conquest-style game, this almost 4X-style game with real Euro foundations. And I will say it did achieve most of that. I will keep harking back to the pacing of this game. It does feel like you're jumping through a lot of hoops to get very little done. And I think that's going to be the lasting impression of this game, unfortunately. I will say, I want to make it very clear that I do not dislike this game. I think it's a lot of fun. I did really enjoy my experience with this one, and I'm glad I've played it. However, in order to secure a place on my shelf, I'm going to have that incentive and that urge to keep coming back to it. And am I going to have that urge to keep coming back to Dark Ages when this is going to take 3.5 hours, and I can play 2 other fast-flowing, dynamic, really great games in that time frame, where, of course, time is at a premium as it is. So am I going to keep reaching for this game to pull it off the shelf? Am I going to get it back to the table? I'm pretty confident that I won't. So yeah, unfortunately, I cannot recommend this one, but again, I still did enjoy it. That is Dark Ages. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.